You think you've got life figured out, a house with solid bones, steady work, a wife you'd bet the farm on. Then one word changes everything. 12 weeks, followed by a name that makes your stomach drop, Rick Calloway. Her boss. Not me. Name's Jack Bennett, Mill Haven, Pennsylvania. I build houses, fix roofs, mind my business. Nothing fancy, just honest work. Last Saturday at Nancy Klein's cookout, I was leaning on the fence, drinking a cold Yuengling, watching Ava charm the crowd. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found me when her friend asked about the surprise. Ava laughed, not the kind that warms a room, the kind that cuts. The bottle slipped out of my hand and smashed. Everybody heard. Nobody said a word. That was the moment. The line between who I thought I was and who I had to become. And once a man crosses that line, there's no going back. No going back meant seeing Mill Haven the way it really is, not the way I wanted it to be. It's a river town that never quite left the mill. Days brick smokestacks, steel truss bridges, bait shops that sell coffee. Strong enough to wake the dead. The Susquehanna slides by like a man keeping his thoughts to himself. My farmhouse sits up on Riverside Road, 2 stories with a roof I rebuilt and a porch frame waiting for finished boards. Old-timers would tap the posts and say, "Good bones." They meant the frame would hold if life got loud. Out here, the air smells like cut pine diesel and wet dirt after rain. It's a place where men keep their promises and pay in cash. I like that. I liked waking up before daylight, hearing the heater kick on, and knowing what the day was for. Back then, I thought a good house and a steady river could keep trouble out. I was wrong. Trouble swims fine. And when trouble swims, a contractor does what he knows checks the line, braces the load. My work is simple math. You can touch, measure, twice cut, once hang the door so it doesn't bind in August. Folks call when pipes freeze or steps rot. I'm the guy who shows up, wipes his boots, and leaves the place better than he found it. You earn trust that way. Some Saturdays, I'd swap a railing for a neighbor, and he'd pay me in cash and a 6-pack, and we'd talk about deer taxes and the high school team. My hand stayed cracked. My back stayed honest. There's pride in that. Not loud pride, just the kind that sits with you at dinner. I figured if I kept building square and true, the rest would follow. Marriage, respect, quiet nights by the porch light. It made sense, like plumb and level, but lumber is honest. People aren't always. You can't sand a lie flat and expect it to hold paint. You learn that difference quickest at home. Ava walked into a room like she owned the air-sharp suit clean lines that corporate shine you see on billboards. She made men stand up straighter and women check their hair in phone screens. I liked that about her once. I liked how she could turn a grocery run into an entrance. But shine can blind you. Somewhere along the way, the talk at our table got thin. She'd scroll emails while I'd sketch stair stringers on a napkin. Her jokes turned into little jabs about my small-town projects and boots by the door. I told myself it was stress. Promotions do that to people. You wait it out. You stay steady. A man my age doesn't throw a fit because the wind shifts. He tightens his grip and rides it. Still, there was a draft in the house. I couldn't find a cold edge in her voice that weather strip wouldn't fix. It made the rooms feel bigger, and not in a good way. When rooms get bigger, the neighborhood gets smaller. Out here, news moves faster than trucks. Nancy Klein, 2 doors down, gardens like it's cardio and treats gossip like it's public service. Not mean exactly, just thorough. She knows who missed a mortgage payment and who bought a boat they shouldn't. I've fixed her back steps twice and never left without hearing who's arguing with who. She says I don't judge, then proceeds to judge with Olympic form. Nancy's yard is where dogs wander, kids cut through, and secrets accidentally come up for air. If something big is happening, it will float past her patio sooner or later, usually with coleslaw. I kept my head down and smiled because in a town like ours, you don't feed the grapevine unless you want wine you can't drink. Still, I felt that current under my boots, like the river when it's high, pulling at things you want anchored. And if Nancy's clock was ticking, mine was about to go off loud enough to rattle the windows. So, Saturday rolls in with sun on the grass and smoke off the grill. Nancy's got the plastic tables lined up, coolers on ice, kids chasing each other with water guns. It felt normal music, low men talking trucks and taxes, women trading recipes, and side-eye. I posted up by the fence with a cold Yuengling, chewing on potato salad and watching Ava do her talent show. Smile, touch a shoulder, tilt her head. She's good in a crowd. I'm better with lumber. We used to meet in the middle, Lately, we didn't. Still, I wasn't there to pick a fight or make a scene. You don't throw mud at a church picnic. I figured I'd finish my beer, shake hands, and get back to hanging porch boards before the light faded, but normal can turn quick the way a ladder kicks if you plant it wrong. All it takes is one sentence you weren't meant to hear landing where it can't be ignored. That sentence walked up on me, smiling. It came out of Brittany Hale's mouth like it was a toast. So, when are you telling Jack about the little surprise? Harmless words, if not for Ava's answer. She laughed, the sharp kind, and said, after Rick's promotion goes through. She didn't whisper Rick Calloway. She let it breathe. The name hung there like a bad beam. That's how you know a thing is true. Nobody rushes to hide it. In that instant, the chatter in the yard turned to a hum I couldn't parse. I stared at the grass, at the way ant trails cut through it like tiny roads, and my grip on the bottle slipped. The glass hit the patio and blew apart clean final. Heads turned. Nobody spoke. That's a small-town mercy. We won't save you, but we won't pile on in public either. I stood there with beer on my boots, replaying her tone, that easy laugh. Promotions, surprises, Rick. The joist didn't creak. It split. And once wood splits, you can't pretend it didn't. You should know who Rick Calloway is so you understand the size of the crack. 6'2" silver hair suits that cost more than my table saw. Owns half the rentals in Millhaven and all the stories people don't tell out loud. He's the guy who eats first at the banquet and touches the shoulder of the mayor like he's checking a stud for load. Smiles wide, eyes narrow. Men like that don't build, they arrange. They point at your work and decide its value. I've seen him at council meetings talking like the river owed him rent. Folks either orbit him or pretend not to see him, which is its own kind of orbit. Hearing his name tied to my wife wasn't just personal. It was structural. It meant money power and pressure where I sleep. It meant my house wasn't only my house anymore. And if you're a man who measures his life in straight lines and true corners, that realization doesn't make you loud. It makes you very, very still. Still enough to hear the tiny fizz of beer on concrete and the little gasps folks make when manners slam into curiosity. I kept my jaw tight, bent down, and started kicking shards away from where kids might run. Hands working while my head pounded. Ava didn't move. Brittany didn't either. Nancy took a step, then thought better of it. I could feel the whole yard holding its breath, waiting to see if I'd make a scene. I didn't. Men my age know the cost of public heat. You pay for it twice. I nodded to Nancy, mumbled something about needing a part from the truck, and walked out the side gate like a man who forgot his wallet. My boots felt heavy like I'd poured wet cement into them. Behind me, the party tried to restart music up a notch. Laughter a shade too bright. But once you hear a crack, you hear it in everything. The day didn't break. It leaned hard and waited to fall. Home wasn't any kinder. The sun had dropped behind the trees, and the frame of that porch threw long ribs across the yard. I set the empty ring from my beer on the workbench and stared at the boards I'd stacked knotty pine good grain, waiting their turn. A half-finished job tells on a man. It says where he got tired, where money ran thin, where life got in the way. Mine said later too many times. I ran my hand along the rail, felt the rough spots I meant to sand, the screws I meant to swap for finish nails. The house didn't judge me. It asked a question. Are you going to fix this or look at it? That's the kind of question a man can answer. Love is messy. Lumber isn't. I pulled a tape and checked a span. I'd checked a dozen times because the world felt tilted, and I needed one true number. The tape didn't lie. The porch would hold. The rest of it we'd see. If the porch would hold, then the truth had to hold too. I sat at the kitchen table phone face down, breathing slow like I do before a tough cut. Then I opened our shared calendar. Meetings, Pilates, a dentist note, and there it was. River Valley Women's Health, Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Labeled routine. Nothing about this was routine. I scrolled back through months the way a man checks old invoices, dinners that ran late, client drinks, a weekend strategy offsite. The dates lined up with little changes at home, new earrings, I hadn't bought a dress that cost more than my circular saw, a smile that never quite made it to her eyes. I wanted the calendar to clear her the way a level bubble settles dead center and says, "You're good." It didn't. It tilted. I looked around the room, mail keys, the bowl for loose screws, and felt the smallest click inside. You can ignore wind. You can't ignore a mark on paper. Tuesday wasn't far. I'd be there. Tuesday showed up the way bad weather does, quiet, then sudden. Ava left early hair, perfect blazer pressed a kiss that hit air where my cheek used to be. I let her taillights get a block ahead, then rolled out in my old F-150 2 car lengths back like a man following a delivery truck to make sure the load doesn't shift. Millhaven was waking up school bus's dogs on leashes, a flag going up outside the firehouse. She turned downtown, then past it toward the medical complex off the highway. No music in my cab, just the heater and the kind of silence that stretches a mile long. I parked across the lot from River Valley Women's Health and watched her walk with that same easy stride I once bragged about. I wasn't there to start a fight. I was there to get clear. One truth beats 100 guesses. She went in without a glance back. I stared at the door hands flat on the wheel and waited. Waiting teaches a man things he doesn't want to learn. 45 minutes of pickups coming and going, men checking watches, women holding coffee tight like it might help. When Ava came out, she was on her phone, smiling the kind of smile I hadn't seen at home in months. Her voice carried across the lot like a nail gun echo. "Rick, it's confirmed." 12 weeks. She laughed once soft and sure. I know. He doesn't suspect a thing." The words didn't hit all at once. They fell in pieces. 12 weeks. Rick. Confirmed. I felt my palm go slick on the steering wheel the way it does when you miss a rung on a ladder and catch yourself on instinct. She kept walking heels sure on the asphalt, then slid into her car and drove like it was any other Tuesday. I didn't chase. I didn't honk. I just sat there until the heater couldn't touch the cold. Some numbers you can't sand down. 12 is one of them. 12 put it right on Valentine's week, the job in Williamsport, where I slept on motel sheets and ate gas station sandwiches at midnight. She told me she had the flu and texted a photo of tea and a blanket. I remember because I sent her a picture of a crooked storefront I'd just straightened captioned "fixed." It felt funny and sweet then. Now it felt like a joke with the punchline on me. I ran the math again slow, like checking a span you don't trust. Start date days appointments, the night she said she had a headache and went to bed early. It didn't need proof beyond what I'd heard, but men my age still check the studs behind the drywall. I scrolled our messages, fewer hearts, more K, more busy. A photograph of a necklace I never bought. The timeline didn't wobble. It locked. I turned the key, pulled onto the road, and drove home steady. There's a quiet that comes with bad math. It sounds like a door closing. Back at the house, every room had a breadcrumb I'd chosen not to see. A receipt in the junk drawer for a dinner I wasn't at. A new perfume bottle tucked behind the old one. Shoes that didn't match our budget but lived by the door like they paid rent. I thought about all the times she came home late, said long day, and slipped past me like I was a coat rack. Truth is, I let the little pieces slide because I wanted the big picture to hold. A man who works with wood knows about knots. You can cut around some. Others you pretend are character and hope no one looks too close. I picked up a bracelet from the counter, held it to the light, and set it down like it could burn. Then I walked the hall and looked at our wedding photo. We were younger there, and I looked taller. Pictures lie, frames lie better. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for lunch. I cleared it. There's a kind of man who sets traps, records, calls, builds a case. He waits weeks. He plays chess. That's not me. I swing a hammer. I fix what's in front of me, so I decided I'd ask for the truth straight up in my own kitchen with my boots on. No grand speech, no shouting, just a line a man can stand on. Ava texted at 5. Running late. Grab something I wrote back. I'll wait. Then I turned on the porch light and let the house glow the way it does in winter, warm against the dark. I laid out 2 plates like it was any night, because habits make courage easier. I wasn't rehearsing. I was breathing. When a joist's cracked, you don't argue with it. You shore it or you pull it. Either way, you move. I sat at the table with the bracelet still there, waiting like a witness. The clock passed 6. Headlights came up the drive. The decision was already made. She came in, juggling Thai takeout and her laptop bag smelling like perfume and cold air. "Hey," she said like the day hadn't bent. I took the food and set it down. "We need to talk." She didn't flinch, just slid off her coat and put it on a chair like a flag on new ground. About what I looked at the bracelet. About Rick Calloway. About 12 weeks. No yelling, no theatrics. Just the truth shaped into a sentence. The room did a slow, steady spin, the kind you get after standing up too quick. She watched me the way you watch a weather report you already know is bad. Then she smiled small and mean. "Took you long enough." I felt the floor drop a half inch. Not panic, not surprise, just wait. "So it's true," she shrugged. It's happening, and it's happening my way. Something in me settled. Men don't always control the storm. We control where we stand. I stayed planted and said, "Not in this house." I wish she'd lied clean. I could have worked with that, but she wasn't interested in mercy. "Rick can give me what you can't," she said, opening cartons, steam curling up like the only warm thing in the room. Money, position, real life. She tapped the bracelet with a nail. "This is the floor now, Jack." I stared at the red curry, the kind she used to steal bites of from my plate, and felt the weirdness of eating while your life changes zip code. "You don't even sound sorry." She tipped her head. "I'm not." The honesty hit harder than the affair. It was the clean cut you don't see coming straight through the grain. I looked past her to the window to the porch frame, waiting like a promise I hadn't kept fast enough. "Then we're done," I said. No slam, no speech, just a sentence a man can repeat to himself later and still stand by. She blinked first. "You can't be serious." I didn't blink back. Serious looks like getting the suitcases down and putting them on the bed without shaking. It looks like opening drawers and not reading every memory you pick up. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break a lamp. I set the cases there and stepped aside. "Pack." She laughed once, then saw I wasn't moving. "You can't kick me out. I live here too." I pointed at the door. "Not tonight." She moved slower than anyone packs. Every hanger became a delay, every shoe a speech. She kept looking over like I might soften. Men do that sometimes, melt at the last second and call it compassion. I didn't. I stood in the doorway with the same face I wear when a beam is cracked and the customer wants cheap fixes. No. Downstairs, the porch light threw calm onto the yard. I carried the suitcases to the door, to the steps, to the gravel. Zippers rattled. A blouse fell. I didn't look down. Some jobs you finish in one trip. Gravel under heels is a loud sound when you're done listening. She gathered the blouse, cheeks hot with a kind of anger that comes from losing home field. Out by the hedge, a shadow moved Nancy Klein, pretending to deadhead flowers at night. Small town mercy again. Watch without watching. Ava tried one more round. "We can work this out. You keep the house. I keep the baby. Everyone wins." I opened the door wider, not to invite her in, to clear the way out. Everyone already lost. She hesitated, waiting for the movie version of me to beg. I raised a hand instead, not a wave, just a stop sign you use with traffic. She loaded the trunk. I shut the door. The slam had the clean, perfect sound of a cut landing true. In a place like Millhaven, that noise travels. By breakfast, folks would know enough to add details. I leaned on the porch post, felt it solid under my palm, and let the night sit heavy. The next knock wouldn't be hers. The next knock wouldn't be hers, but the sound that came first was her laugh, dry, rehearsed, like a commercial, with the volume up. "You're overreacting," Ava said, chin high. "Rick's putting me in for VP. Real money. Real life." She said it like a weather report, inevitable. I didn't need a forecast. "Pack your things." She smirked the way people do when they think they've got leverage. "You sure you want to do this, Jack?" Men like Rick don't lose. Maybe that's true downtown. Out here, men still lock their doors and sleep fine. "This house is mine," I said, voice steady. "The porch, the studs, the mortgage I paid. Pack." She rolled her eyes like I'd just complained about the Wi-Fi and brushed past me, heels clipping our floor like it was a runway. It wasn't a fight, not yet. It was a decision being poured, and once it sets, you don't pry it apart. She looked back, waiting for a crack. I gave her nothing but the hallway, and the time it takes to fill 2 suitcases. Zippers have a way of sounding final when the room's quiet. I pulled the suitcases down from the closet, the good ones we bought for trips we never took, and set them on the bed. She stood there, hands on hips, measuring me for weakness. I didn't offer her any. "You can't kick me out tonight." She tried again, voice softening into a trick she'd used before. "We can be adults." I shook my head. Adults don't need lies to breathe. She started folding the expensive dresses you dry clean, even when the tag says you don't have to. Little piles became neat stacks, became questions. "You're throwing away a good life," she said, like I'd misplaced a coupon. "We had a plan. I had a marriage," I said, handing her the second case. "You had a promotion." The zipper dragged across the teeth with that clean zipper sound you don't forget. Gravity took over. If she wanted a scene, she wasn't getting one. What she got was a door prop open and a path out. Packing looks different when love's not in the room. She smoothed silk and laid it like evidence shoes lined up like you'd line up tools before a job. My hands itched to fix something hinge squeak loose, outlet cover, anything that made sense. Instead, I stood in the doorway and kept the count honest. There's a way a man helps without helping steady breathing. No comments, no history lessons. I thought about the years we'd spent making our house look like a magazine picture and how the best parts were always the things we did ourselves, painted trim, the garden we kept alive for 2 summers, the Christmas lights we hung too early because the first frost felt like permission. Ava paused over a framed photo of us in better light, then slid it face down like you do with a losing hand. Last chance, she said, not looking up. I didn't blink. She put the frame in the suitcase anyway. That's when I knew there wasn't a single thing left to negotiate. When it was my turn, I lifted the suitcases like they were bags of mortar, awkward, heavier than they should be, full of something that dries hard and never lets go. Stairs creaked under the weight of what we weren't saying. I didn't clatter them for effect or drop them to make a point. I just carried them the way men carry things when it's time to be done, one in each hand, shoulders square, no commentary. The porch light threw a clean circle on the steps, and for a second, I remembered the day I installed that fixture, how she stood in the doorway with a beer and called me Sparky, like it was a private joke. Then I set both cases down and opened the door wider. She stood just inside, coat draped over one arm, lips pressed thin. "You're going to regret this," she said. Maybe I answered, but not tonight. I stepped back so the jam wouldn't catch her bag. There's a dignity you owe even to endings. I gave that much and not a drop more. Out on the driveway, the night had that damp Pennsylvania bite that goes through denim. Her heels met gravel and the sound had a temper to it. Click, grind, click. A blouse slipped out a side pocket and floated down like a white flag nobody meant. She caught it cheeks bright in the porch light and stuffed it back like I was the thief. I didn't look at the fabric or the brand. Expensive or not, it was just cloth, moving from one life to another. The F-150 sat quiet under the maple bed, full of tomorrow's lumber. The world was still the world. She popped her trunk and the car beeped twice like it approved of the choice. I set the cases in, careful not to scratch the paint. She watched my hands the way you watch a stranger handle your dog, mistrust and nostalgia in the same glance. "Tell yourself whatever helps," she said, closing the trunk. The hinge thumped. It echoed more than it should. That's what empty doesn't make sound travel. Across the hedge, Nancy Klein was weeding, which is what we call watching when we don't want to call it watching. She had a flashlight clenched under her arm, beam pointed nowhere, doing exactly 0 yard work at 9 at night. That's community witnesses with plausible deniability. She caught my eye, froze, then found a stubborn dandelion that needed urgent removal. In a place like Millhaven, folks hold your business the way they hold a casserole, careful at first, then it cools fast. I didn't wave. She didn't wave, but I knew the morning would have a version of this rounded off and retold over eggs. "You okay, Jack?" she finally called, too soft to reach Ava. "I will be," I said and left it there. She nodded like a pastor who's heard enough confession for one day. The porch light hummed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing, the kind of nothing that happens right before something else. I could feel the next thing walking our way already. Ava slid behind the wheel and pulled out like the driveway owed her an apology. Taillights washed the maple red for a second, then were gone. The quiet afterward felt like a room after a funeral, when the casseroles are covered, and these cases are full as well. I cracked a Yuengling and stood on the unfinished porch. Boards took a long pull and raised the bottle toward the empty road, a little salute to an old life heading for the highway. I wasn't celebrating. I was marking it the way a man sets a nail as a reference point. The beer went down cold and honest. A moth bumped the porch light and kept bumping. I thought about calling Frank, then didn't. Men my age don't dial a buddy for play-by-play. We stand still and let the blood quiet. I could have gone inside. I stayed outside and listened to the river's long breath. From here, a clean break looked simple. Simple's a liar, same as pretty pictures. Somewhere in the dark, a motor turned over that didn't belong to her. That's the dangerous minute when you think the story's over and start putting tools away. I took another sip, set the bottle on the rail, and felt the kind of tired you get after lifting shingles all day. Part of me wanted to sweep up the little gravel trails her heels had made and call it closure, but even endings make noise on their way out. The night-shifted crickets paused like a record caught under a needle, and the air took on that exhaust smell you notice before you hear the engine. I told myself it was a neighbor's kid with a loud muffler or a couple heading in from late shift. The porch light flickered once, then held steady. I counted out loud to keep my breath from running. 1, 2, 3. By 4, the sound topped the hill, big black, and too smooth for this road. The kind of vehicle men buy when they want to be noticed without asking. I didn't step back. I set the bottle down and squared up. The Escalade rolled in slow, a shark in a shallow pool, headlights sweeping across the yard and catching the edges of my tools like a cop's flashlight. It idled in the drive with that smug V8 thrum, enough to rattle glass, not enough to wake a baby. Doors popped in sequence, 2 silhouettes, then a third, thick through the shoulders, the kind of thick you don't get from push-ups. I knew the posture before I knew the face. Guys who step like the ground owes them a receipt. The big one smiled too wide, like he was practicing friendliness for a parole board. Cole Grizz Barnes. I'd seen him around Callaway Holdings, tie knotted just right to hide the holster bulge, the kind of man who collects favors. Evening, he said, like we were neighbors borrowing sugar. I didn't answer. Some words don't deserve rent in your house. He glanced at the porch, at me, at the beer. We're just here to talk. Men who mean talk don't bring company. I let the silence tell him I spoke that language too. I reached behind the doorframe without looking and wrapped my hand around the aluminum bat that lives there for snakes and bad ideas. Grizz clocked it and didn't flinch. Pros don't. The smaller one to his left tried on a grin that didn't fit. Boss says there's been a misunderstanding, he offered. Says you're gonna make it right. I stepped off the porch and onto the yard because men who stand on their own grass feel different. This is private property, I said, polite like a warning shot. Conversation's over. Grizz chuckled low and rehearsed. Come on, Jack. Don't be that guy. You're gonna take Ava back nice and quiet. And when the baby shows up, you're gonna smile for the Christmas card. The bat felt light in my hand, the way a tool feels when it's about to be used. I set my feet like I was digging a post hole. 3-on-1 isn't neighborly, I said. He spread his hands. Fair's expensive. And just like that, the next minute cost more than all the rest. If the next minute cost more than all the rest, then it started with me saying it plain private property. I didn't shout it. I planted it like a fence post you set deep and true. Grizz smiled like a man who's seen fences fall. Easy, Mr. Bennett, he said, voice smooth as new asphalt. We're here to help you correct a mistake. You're gonna take Ava back. You're gonna be a gentleman about it. The way he said gentleman meant obedient. I stepped off the porch and felt my own ground under my boots. The bat fit my hand the way a wrench fits a nut you've turned 100 times. Behind him, the 2 shadows fanned out, lazy hands, loose eyes busy. I thought of men who call this kind of thing a conversation, and how conversations don't arrive in threes. Last chance, I told him steady. Leave my yard. He shook his head like he was embarrassed for me. Last chance is what I'm here to give you. Promises is a funny word for what came next, but that's what it was. I promised myself I wouldn't be the man who backs down on his own grass. Grizz took another step. He wanted me cornered by my own door. I moved first. The bat came over from my shoulder and sank into his ribs with a sound you don't forget, half breath, half bark. He folded not all the way, just enough for truth to reach him. The one on my left lunged. I pivoted and caught his knuckles. The metal rang and the pistol clattered into the hedge. For a heartbeat, I thought I might pull this off. That's how trouble sells itself, gives you a taste of winning right before the tab. The third one was already moving. Something black and narrow flashed. A baton telescoped out like bad luck. It whistled past and kissed the side of my skull. Stars. Then the world juddered like a truck dropping a gear on a hill. Real pain has manners. It introduces itself, shakes your hand, and moves right in. They didn't dogpile me wild. They worked me like they'd read manuals. Rib shot, knee tap, shoulder bite. Grizz recovered and paid me back with calm, mean efficiency, each hit placed where a man doesn't show bruises with a shirt on. I got the bat up once more and clipped somebody's thigh. He yelped and went meaner. The baton found my forearm, then my back, and I felt a heat that wasn't weather. That's enough, Grizz said finally, like a foreman calling lunch. I could hear my breath through my teeth, short and stupid. He crouched, eyes bright. See? We can be polite when folks are polite. You're gonna apologize to Mrs. Bennett. You're gonna smile for pictures. I spit blood, thick as old coffee, onto the grass between us. No. He nodded to the others. Education continues. The night blurred at the edges. Somewhere a dog barked, then thought better of it. After the lesson comes the ride. Zip ties bit my wrists, cheap plastic with a bite-like wire. They walked me to the Escalade like I was drunk and they were friends seeing me home. Then the trunk swallowed me and the world shrank to carpet stink and the bass thrum of V8 arrogance. You learn things in a trunk you don't learn anywhere else. You learn how loud your own breath is. You learn every bump in your road. My shoulder knocked metal, my boots tangled, and I tried to count the turns because men like me always think we can fix things if we can map them. Left at the mailbox, right past the feed store up over the ridge. The math failed when the road went dirt. The smell changed oil and pine and old leaves. Tires hissed on gravel, then slowed to a stop that sounded like we'd reached the edge of the world. The lid popped, cold poured in. A face blocked the moon. Rise and shine. Dark in the woods is different than dark in town. Town has hum and spill a halo off the next block. Woods has teeth. They stood me up and my legs argued but followed. Pines lifted black arms. The river was a rumor somewhere far off. Field trip, one of the juniors said, pushing me forward. Grizz walked ahead, hands easy in his coat, like he'd done this stroll before. We're gonna align expectations, he said over his shoulder. Cal Rick doesn't like confusion. He said Rick's name like a man says client, not boss. That's important to men like him. They stopped in a small clearing where moonlight sifted down like flour. Breath steamed out of all of us, mine louder. My ribs lit every inhale with a match. Grizz turned smile back in place. Lesson 2, property. The word hung dumb in the cold. He reached inside his coat and brought out a knife that caught the moon clean. Everything's property if you can pay for it. Even breath. He set the flat of the blade against my neck and pressed just enough to make the skin think about bleeding. It wasn't sloppy. It was practiced. The knife smelled like oil and cedar, like it had a better life carving something honest. This isn't personal, Grizz said, which is the thing men say right before making it personal. You touched what belongs to Mr. Calloway. You embarrassed his house. I found my voice wedged under my tongue. She's not property. He tilted his head, sad little teacher face. Son, everything's property. Some folks just file the paperwork. The two juniors chuckled, the kind of laugh that keeps the cold off. I looked up through branches at a thin ribbon of stars and thought about the porch, the posts set deep, the way a beam trusts the ground more than the air. Cut me then, I said, and meant it half and not at all. Grizz smiled wider. No, like I said, this is education. It sticks better when you walk away. What followed wasn't a brawl, it was budgeting. They spent pain like money with a plan. Knee, ribs, stomach, pause, repeat. The baton drummed a rhythm a man doesn't forget. There's a sound a body makes when it's learning something it didn't ask to learn. Somewhere between hit 5 and 15, I stopped trying to count and started hunting for breath, like a dropped tool in tall grass. Grizz didn't rush. He corrected posture with little taps, adjusted angles, turned the lesson into a seminar. You're going to tell folks you were drunk and fell, he said, conversational, like we were talking fishing. You're going to stop talking about Mr. Calloway, and you're going to send a message to your little friends. I thought of Frank Delaney, of the way he checks his mirrors twice, of how men who've seen things keep their voice low. No, I wheezed. It wasn't brave. It was reflex. The baton answered. Lights blew behind my eyes, hot and white. The lesson kept going. Every job has a finish. This one came with a coil of nylon rope and a pine with rough bark. They fed it around my chest and arms pulled it tight until wood pressed into bone. Hands went numb first, then the idea of hands. Grizz leaned in close enough for me to see a nick under his left eye, a tiny old scar that said, "Somebody once got lucky." Tell anyone he said knife back in view, but quiet now, and next time we don't bring a lesson plan. He patted the rope like a dad checks a car seat. Someone will find you, or not. Either way, you'll remember. The juniors laughed on cue. Sneakers cracked frost as they turned away. Engines sound different leaving than arriving. This one sounded satisfied. I listened until the hum fell into the trees, and the trees swallowed it whole. Then the cold spoke up, and it didn't whisper. It told me time had rules. Cold is an auditor. It goes line by line, starting with your fingers. My breath fogged and blew back in my face. I worked my wrists against the rope and felt friction bite skin off in little coins I could spend on maybe. You learn tricks on job sites. how to pull a nail with no claw, how to use a scrap of sandpaper like a file. Bark can be a file if you have time and skin. I set the zip tie against a knot in the pine and sawed slow, short strokes because big moves waste heat. The night stretched. Coyotes tuned up low somewhere past the ridge, and every hair I had made bad choices. I talked to myself under my breath, the way men do when the work is stubborn. Easy, keep it square, stay with it. The rope chewed my jacket, then my shirt, then my will. I thought of the heater kicking on back home, of the porch light I left burning, and I fed those thoughts into my hands like kindling. Kindling gets you a flame, but it won't cook supper. I needed a cut I could grow. The tie started to give, not much, just a whisper of slack. I leaned into it, and the pine bit back sap sharp and honest in my nose. Sweat found the cold and turned mean. Time stopped being minutes and turned into inches. Inch the tie, inch my breath, inch the thought that tomorrow existed. My ribs argued each inhale with small, petty fists. I pictured the porch again the way the tape reads the same no matter who's holding it, and I borrowed that truth. Again, I told my hands. Again. The plastic warmed under friction, softening from hard to almost. If you've ever bent a stubborn screw back straight, you know that feeling right before it snaps the music of almost. I chased it. The knot chewed my skin raw, but the tie thinned, whined, and then, not yet. Close, but not yet. That's fine. A man can live in almost if almost is moving. I kept moving. Almost kept me alive long enough for dawn to show up gray and cold and not interested in my feelings. The zip tie thinned to a line, then sang that little high note things make right before they quit. I leaned into it and felt the bite turn to give. Snap. Hands again. Bad hands, bloody and dumb, but mine. I worked the rope, neck, shoulders, elbow patience, until the pine let me go, like a boss who finally figures out you're not quitting. I didn't stand up proud. I rolled, then crawled, then found knees that remembered their job. The clearing looked smaller in daylight, like monsters look smaller when the closet doors open. Every step was a bill from the night before, but steps still spend. I picked a line between trees aiming for where the ground dipped. Water means road. Road means somebody with a truck and a thermos. I talked out loud to keep the engine running. Left foot, right foot, stay square. The woods didn't care. The woods let me pass. The ground finally leveled, and a strip of dirt showed up with tire scars and beer cans logging road. It felt like finding a stud under drywall. I followed it downhill slow as January honey counting poles to steal distance. Every 50 yards, I'd lean on one and let my ribs complain. The world narrowed to Boots' frost breath. I tried to think of smart plans and got static. Fine. Not plans. Priorities. Get to a real road. Flag a real person. Then maybe a hospital if pride didn't bark too loud. A hawk pushed its shadow across the ruts. I kept moving. When pavement finally flashed through the trees, I laughed out an ugly sound that scared a squirrel into cussing me out. U.S. Route 15 sat there, plain as a tape measure, thin traffic, wide shoulder, no promises. I stepped out both hands up like I'd been pulled over, and the sky did this slow spin you get when you stand too fast. I tried to wave. My arm didn't agree. The blacktop came up to meet me. I've hit knees before roof ladders, attic beams, but not like that. Asphalt is honest. It doesn't catch you. It reminds you it was here first. I tasted salt and pennies and heard tires hiss by in both directions like folks were driving past a deer nobody wanted to claim. I rolled to my side so I wouldn't end up a news item. A pickup slowed, then sped. Fear has its own accelerator. I don't blame anyone who kept going. Then a beat-up Ford with a dented fender eased over gravel popping. Door opened, Boots hit shoulder sure and unhurried. "Well, hell," a familiar voice said. "Jack Bennett, you look like somebody lost a fight with an idea." Frank Delaney, retired state cop, lived alone, knew everybody. He squatted where I could see his hands and his eyes, old habits clicking on. "You with me?" I nodded. He didn't ask for details. He got an arm under me, the way men do who've lifted their share of weight that wasn't theirs, and he walked me toward the passenger seat. Frank didn't talk while he drove. He let the heater do its work and watched the mirrors like they were going to tell a joke. His truck smelled like coffee and gun oil and a kind of clean that comes from wiping the same dash for 20 years. He turned off Route 15, cut through back roads only locals use, then nosed up a gravel drive to a small cabin tucked in pines that have seen things. "Sit tight," he said, as if I could do anything else. Inside, he set me on a chair that had held worse, found a first aid kit, and got to it: peroxide sting, gauze tape, the whole old-school routine. "Hospital?" he asked without looking up. "No cops." "Not yet." He didn't argue. He's the kind of man who lets you choose your pain. He heated a can of soup, slid it over with a spoon, and waited until the spoon clicked empty. Only then. "What's your play?" The answer sat where my breath should have been. "Don't know," I said. "Not yet." "Not yet" didn't satisfy Frank, but he let it sit. He poured coffee into a chipped mug with a faded fish on it and set it in front of me. "Start simple," he said. "What do you know?" So I laid it out like parts on a workbench. Ava Rick Calloway, the Escalade Grizz, the knife that smelled like cedar, the lesson plan in the trees. Frank's jaw worked while I talked, but his eyes stayed flat. Men who've seen trouble don't blink at it. "Okay," he said finally. "We don't poke the hornet nest drunk. You sleep, you eat. Then we count hornets." I looked down at my hands, cut swelling rope burn that would scab ugly, and felt anger do that slow pour that turns into a footing. "He thinks he owns me," I said. Frank nodded. "He thinks he owns the whole town. Men like that always forget the quiet ones." He took out a pad and a pencil from a drawer full of odds and ends, names, places, patterns, he said. "Let's make a list." We made columns: Rick's companies, his favorite haunts, the politicians who smiled too wide around him. Frank added notes the way a carpenter shims a shaky table, small, precise, effective. "He likes to be seen," Frank said. "Ribbon cuttings, charity breakfasts. He collects cameras." I thought about the way Rick walks through a room like it's a house he's already bought, and the way men in suits angle themselves into his shadow. Ego and reputation. That's his load-bearing wall. You don't swing at concrete when you can pull the pin. "I don't want a bar fight," I said. "I want a message." Frank poured me more coffee. "Then we start small and loud," he said. "Pick the man who hits you and make him feel it where he sleeps. Grizz. He'd be out in the open somewhere. He thinks he's safe somewhere with mirrors so he can practice being important." The copper still came to mind, back alley parking whiskey list longer than the menu town's own little stage. For 2 days, I slept in shifts and let soup and coffee patch holes. When I could walk without tasting stars, I took Frank's old binoculars and a thermos and parked 3 blocks from the copper still. Middle of the week, you learn a lot. Grizz rolled up late alone. Professionals don't bring dates to their office. He parked his pretty Mercedes in the alley like the car deserved better pavement. He liked the corner stool, with a line of sight to the door and a mirror behind bottles so he could see who saw him. He ordered top shelf and tipped like a man spending someone else's money. I watched which way he turned to pee, how he held a glass finger and thumb, arrogant, who he nodded to bartender. 1 councilman, 2 guys who wanted something. You make a plan from small things. I sketched the alley on a napkin dumpster drain, 1 sad camera that points at the wrong door. It wasn't bravery brewing, it was math with teeth. My toolbox for this job wasn't hammers and screws. It was zip ties, duct tape, a bucket of raw shrimp that would rot a saint, and the aluminum bat with a grip I rewrapped because details matter. Frank didn't love it, didn't stop it. "You sure?" he asked. I was. Men like Grizz don't read sermons. They feel consequences. I waited until Thursday because Thursday is when men like him drink like they earned it. Mist hit the alley and made the pavement shine. I stood in the dark by the dumpster, breathing slow, counting down the last doubts like they were nails I didn't need. The back door hissed and laughter spilled out with him, his not kind. He turned the corner, adjusting his jacket, hand drifting toward the place he hides steel. He was a half-second slower than sober. Half a second is a gift. I took it. The bat whispered in low and clean and kissed his knuckles first. Metal met bone pistol skittered into the storm drain with a sound that made me smile despite myself. He swung a blind elbow. I stepped through it and put the next shot into thigh. No break, just a promise. He cursed and tried to climb big. I knocked that ladder out from under him with a quick jab to the ribs. He folded just enough. "Remember me?" I asked, not loud, not a movie line, just a man asking a reasonable question. He did. His eyes said so. I kept it professional. No face, no permanent, just the sort of pain that makes tomorrow longer than it needs to be. When the fight drained out of him, I walked him to the Mercedes, sat him down, and zip-tied his wrists behind the seat, duct tape over the belt so he couldn't wriggle. Then I rolled every window up and cranked the heat to August. The shrimp went under the dash and behind the seat, deep where it could preach for weeks. I held his phone up to his face. It unlocked like a dog that doesn't know better. "Selfie time," I said, and took a few, then took better ones. No blood, just sweat and duct tape, and a big man looking very small. I posted to his accounts with captions. A teenager could have written nothing criminal, everything humiliating. Hashtag tough night. Hashtag security guy. You don't beat a bully by being meaner. You beat him by making him ridiculous. I set the phone on the hood, stepped back into the mist, and listened to the heater roar. He started promising things he couldn't deliver. I let him talk. Somewhere inside the copper, still a song about bad luck hit the chorus. I raised 2 fingers to my brow, a little salute, and walked out the alley the way I came in. This wasn't victory. This was the knock. Tomorrow we'd see who opened the door. Tomorrow showed up, and it wasn't Rick who opened the door, it was Millhaven. By breakfast, Grizz's photos were everywhere. Screens lit up at the diner, guys leaning over black coffee, doing the head shake, laugh men do when a bully trips on his own shoes. On Facebook, Millhaven Moms and More turned into a county fair. Comments, theories, a few recipes for how to get shrimp smell out of leather. Teenagers made memes faster than I could read them. At the hardware store, 2 roofers scrolled and whistled low. "Ain't that Callaway's guy? Yep." Tow truck driver posted a video of the Mercedes getting hauled like a fridge window's fogged heater, screaming. Nobody said my name. Nobody had to. The town didn't need a narrator. It needed a laugh, and it got one. That's the thing about reputation. Once it slips, everyone loves the slide. By noon, Grizz wasn't feared. He was featured. That's when I knew I had weight to throw, and throwing it in daylight would matter most. Consequences have a scent, and that car wore it like a suit. By mid-morning, the Copper Still Alley was a tourist stop bartender hosing the pavement, manager swearing about ruined optics, Grizz nowhere in sight. A woman from the salon 2 doors down posted, "If you park like a jerk, the universe handles it." And 13 folks said, "Amen." I didn't gloat. I measured. Fear gives power. Laughter takes it. Men my age know, once the jokes start, the grip loosens. I topped off the F-150, bought a sandwich, and watched the town do what towns do. Store it, share it, soften it into a story people can tell at supper. Then I set the next line, not a punch, a presence. You don't have to shout when the echo's already working for you. If Grizz was the first brick out of the wall, the next move was to rattle the whole frame in front of witnesses. You don't beat a suit in a back alley, you beat him in a parking lot. So I drove to Callaway Holdings, parked where everyone parks, and let the truck idle like I had time because I did. Folks streamed in and out with to-go cups. The receptionist stepped out for air. I waited until Rick Callaway came through the glass, new suit, old swagger, 2 fresh guards built like gym debts. He scanned the lot the way men do who expect the world to salute. Then he saw me. I rolled my window down and lifted a hand, calm as Sunday. Morning, Rick. Not loud, not taunting, public. His jaw twitched. He said something sharp to the guards, but even they knew the math cameras, witnesses, 100 phones in pockets. You don't teach a contractor manners in broad daylight. Rick's smile tried to climb back on his face and fell off halfway. He went to his car like it was a lifeboat. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The point was made. I wasn't hiding. The town could see me, see him. That's a kind of pressure money hates. Pressure works best when it changes temperature. I left the lot and drove straight to small places where stories get stored. The barber shop, the feed store, the diner. I didn't preach. I asked clean questions. Men understand. How's Rick keep winning? No bid work. Who's on the council committee for permits? Anyone ever see his deals written down? Nothing libel, just air holes. By afternoon, those questions had legs. The barber remembered a ribbon-cutting check. The feed store guy remembered a lost invoice. A waitress said she saw a councilman leave a back booth, smiling like Christmas. I sent anonymous tips to the Susquehanna County ledger dates, places, names spelled right. I showed up at a town meeting and used my 3 minutes to ask about transparency, not revenge. Men my age don't trust speeches. We trust receipts. If ego and reputation were Rick's load-bearing wall, then doubt was the pry bar. I didn't need to swing hard. I needed to keep pressure on the nails until they squealed. Next morning, I parked at Calloway's lot again, not to poke, to prove I could. Rick came out hotter red at the collar guards, stiffer than yesterday. He stopped 5 feet from my bumper, practiced smile gone. You could feel the leash in the air. Lawyers on one end, public eyes on the other. "You think this is a game?" he said, voice too tight for the performance he wanted. I shrugged. I think daylight is honest. A couple employees slowed without looking like they were slowing. The receptionist clicked her phone camera by accident. Rick's hands came up, then remembered where we were and went back down. He leaned in like he could whisper the town quiet. "This ends badly for you." I let him see that his words didn't move me an inch. Maybe I said, "But not here, not today." He pivoted hard, nearly lost a heel, and vanished behind the glass. The guards watched me like I was a nail sticking proud. Good. Nails get noticed before they get pulled. If nails get noticed before they get pulled, receipts are the claw that does the work. I called Evan Price at the Susquehanna County Ledger, a reporter who's been chasing smoke around Rick for years. We met in a booth at the Truck Stop Diner off 15 Bad Coffee. Good privacy. I didn't bring speeches. I brought dates, emails, photos of ribbon cuttings with the right faces lined up in the right order. Evan didn't grin. He organized. Names, contracts, council votes that lined up too neat. We rebuilt the story like a deck ledger first boards later. He called 3 sources who were sick of swallowing it. One sent bank records with the numbers blacked out wrong. Another handed over a voicemail you could play in church and still get the point. Evan wrote like a man who'd finally found the stud behind the drywall. The headline landed Thursday: Callaway's quiet empire. No bid deals, deep pockets, deeper shadows. Phones lit up. Radio hosts sniffed the blood. By supper, the AG's office was reviewing. Pressure turned official. Official pressure makes men like Rick shed skin. By Friday, the Bentley was gone. A silver Camry took its spot like a demotion with hubcaps. He stopped using the front door. He started staring at floors. I watched him from across a parking lot and saw 10 extra years settle in one morning. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text: Old Mill. 8. No bluster, no threat. Just a place and time, Old Susquehanna Mill, the dead heart of Millhaven brick ribs and busted windows. I drove there slow, let the river show me how to breathe. The sun left early, crows wrote their names across the sky. I parked outside the chain link and walked in through a hole teenagers made last summer. He was already there, leaning on the hood of that Camry like it was a confession booth. No guards, no lawyer, just the sound of tin settling and his breath finding out what work feels like. He looked up and tried on a smile that didn't fit anymore. That broken smile told me the town didn't need another whisper, it needed light. I held up my phone where he could see it. "We're doing this live," I said. He flinched at the word more than the lens. Facebook Live spun up. Comments bloomed like weeds. Millhaven moms and more poured in first, then roofers, barbers, guys from the firehouse. "Why here?" he asked, eyes darting for exits that didn't exist. "Because this place is what you did to us," I said. "Emptied out. Used up." He started with the script, misunderstandings, timing, politics, and the comments chewed it to bones. I kept the frame tight on his face and asked simple questions. Did you send Grizz? Did you buy votes? Do you think you own people? Somewhere around the third question, his voice cracked. The suit man who points and arranges ran out of arrangement. He tried to leave. I stepped left. He tried to posture. I didn't blink. The chat turned into a chorus apologize. He did finally thin broken, real enough to count. Real enough to count meant the town got a piece of itself back. It didn't mean I did. The next afternoon, the porch saw new visitors, Ava and Brittany, shoulders tight, eyes wider than I'd ever seen. They stood in the same light that watched me carry suitcases. "We need a truce," Ava said, voice raw enough to scrape. "Think about the baby." I thought about the tree bark, the rope burned the porch. I finished without her. I thought about the way a man sleeps when he's finally earned it. Brittany jumped in faster words. Smaller hopes, jobs gone, doors closed, rent due. I let them finish. Then I gave them what I had left, the straight line. Live with the choices you made. No heat, no sermon, just a fence post in the ground. Ava searched my face for the mess she could work with. There wasn't any. "You're cruel," she said. "No," I answered. "I'm done." They left with the quiet you hear when people run out of leverage. The porch held. The river moved. So did I. The porch held. The river moved. So did I. I set the last board, sank the last screw, and ran my palm along the rail until the grain felt like a promise kept. Good bones proved out. The frame didn't sag, not this time. The sun slid behind the trees and threw long orange lines across Riverside Road. I cracked a cold Ewingling, let it sweat on my knuckles, and listened to the heater kick on inside, like a house saying, "You're home." Fear used to run this town. Laughter took its place. Ego tried to own me. Receipts owned ego. I won't pretend justice is tidy. It's more like a deck. You level one shim at a time, checking the bubble until it sits dead center. I lost a marriage. I kept a man. That's the math. Neighbors will talk. Let 'em. The tape still reads true, no matter who reads it. I raised the bottle to the quiet and paid off the line I've been earning. I got my self-respect back. Justice or revenge, you decide. Drop your take in the comments and subscribe for the aftermath.